The mountain looked less like stone than a trap waiting to remember its teeth. By the third day under the shadow of the Misty Mountains, even the air had changed. It came colder off the heights, thin as a blade and sharp enough to slip through wool, fur, and pride alike. The road, or what passed for one in that broken country, had narrowed to a thread between old falls of stone, blind ledges, and slopes that seemed forever on the verge of giving way. A man might misstep and vanish there without so much as a cry returning. Bilbo rode in silence more often now. There was less room in him for complaint. The mountains had taken that from him. They stood too vast for grumbling, too ancient for comfort. Their ridges rose like the backs of sleeping giants, and their white crowns were hidden at times behind writhing cloud, as if the sky itself had come down to whisper over them. Gandalf led with the grim assurance of one who had passed such ways before and trusted them only because he trusted nothing. Elrond's counsel had spared them the worst of the trails, the wizard said, a mercy, though Bilbo found little mercy in the path beneath his pony's hooves. On either side, ravines opened black and sudden. Broken pines clung to the slopes below like bent old men hanging over graves. The dwarves spoke less as well. Even the younger ones, Fili and Kili, whose tongues were usually quick and light, kept their laughter buried. Thorin rode stern and proud at the head of his folk, but pride sits poorly beside hunger, worse beside cold, and worst of all, beside heights that care nothing for kings. Now and again, Bilbo glanced upward and thought the peaks were watching. Not with malice, perhaps, something older than that. The storm did not arrive like weather. It arrived like war. It began with a muttering beyond the peaks, deep and rolling, as if some enormous door were being battered open in the clouds. Then came the wind. It rushed through the passes with a wolf's long hunger, biting at cloaks, tearing at the pony's tack, and setting loose small stones that skipped and clattered down the slopes. The daylight dimmed by degrees until afternoon wore the face of dusk. Bilbo had never known thunder to sound so cruel, not in the Shire, where rain came fat and friendly over green fields and snug roofs. Here it broke above them like the laughter of angry gods. Lightning leapt from height to height, white and blue and merciless, showing for one sharp instant the jagged bones of the world, before darkness swallowed them again. In those flashing moments, the cliffs seemed full of shapes. Great crags hunched like monsters, narrow shelves like the ruins of stairways, black mouths in the stone where anything might wait. The company pressed on as long as they could, heads bent, ponies skittish beneath them. Water ran down every slope. The path grew slick. Loose shale turned treacherous underfoot. Once Bilbo heard a crash somewhere far off and saw a rain of stones pouring down another face of the mountain. He pulled tight at his pony's reins and felt very small indeed. They might have perished there, if not for sharp eyes and a little luck. Fili and Kili, scouting ahead with the restless boldness of youth, found a dry opening in the mountainside, a cave, shallow seeming from the mouth, hidden enough to promise shelter. The dwarves lost no time. Ponies were led inside, packs unstrapped, blankets shaken out. A fire was judged too dangerous, but food was eaten cold with grateful hands. Outside, the thunder rolled on and on. Inside, for a little while, they dared believe themselves safe. Mountains love that kind of belief. Safety lasted just long enough to teach Bilbo how quickly it could be stolen. Sleep in that cave came hard and shallow. The storm never truly passed. It prowled beyond the stone like some huge beast denied its meal. The dwarves lay where they could, wrapped in cloaks, weapons near at hand. The ponies shifted and stamped from time to time, uneasy in the dark. Bilbo slept among them all, with one hand tucked beneath his cheek and the other clenched in his blanket, as if cloth could stand against mountains. Then he woke. No dream warned him, no sound at first either, save for a strange tugging scrape where no scrape should have been. Bilbo opened his eyes to darkness and confusion, and for one thick heartbeat, he did not understand what he was seeing. The back wall of the cave, solid stone when they had made camp, was no longer whole. A crack had opened there, blacker than the night around it, wide enough for a pony's body. From it came long arms, crooked hands, and a burst of foul breath that stank of caves, blood, and old meat. The ponies screamed. One was dragged backward first, hooves flailing, iron shoes striking sparks from stone. Another followed, yanked into the dark so fast it vanished like a dropped pebble into a well. Bilbo found his voice then and cried out, a small cry in itself perhaps, but full of terror enough to wake the dead. It woke dwarves instead, and goblins. They came leaping from the crack by the dozens, hard hands, flat feet, yellow teeth, knives like jagged slivers of moonlight. The cave erupted into chaos. Dwarves cursed and fought half awake, yet numbers told. Ropes flashed, clubs fell. Bilbo felt himself seized, bound, and hauled along before he could do more than gasp. Thorin raged, Bomber bellowed, someone shouted for Gandalf. But Gandalf was not there. That was the last thing Bilbo understood before the dark swallowed him and the world dropped under the mountain. The heart of the mountain had a throne, and on it sat Hunger, wearing a crown of filth. They were dragged downward through tunnels that seemed made not by patient water or lawful craft, but by claw, malice, and endless use. Bilbo stumbled where he could, was carried where he could not, and lost all sense of direction before long. The air grew hotter in places, colder in others. Side passages branched and twisted. The walls sweated. Voices echoed ahead and behind, shrill laughter, snarling orders, the slap of bare feet on stone. At last they were driven into a vast cavern, lit by torches and a great central fire whose smoke curled up into blackness above. There the goblins gathered, thick as flies around carrion. Upon a raised seat of hewn rock sprawled the great goblin, huge and hideous, his eyes like greasy lamps, and his mouth wide enough to promise very ugly deaths. He looked them over with the satisfaction of a jailer presented a fresh chain gang. "What are you doing in my mountain?" his manner asked, if not his exact words. Thorin, bound though he was, answered with such dignity as he could muster. Storm, shelter, no ill purpose, no quarrel sought. It might almost have served. Then one of the goblins came lurching forward with a prize in his clawed hands. Thorin's sword, taken at capture and now held aloft for all to see. The chamber changed in an instant. Goblin mutters became shrieks. Faces twisted with sudden hate. They knew that blade. They knew its old name and older work. This was no nameless scrap of steel stolen from dead trolls. This was a sword with memory in it, a weapon that had opened goblins before and might yet again. The great goblin's rage filled the hall. He surged from his seat, murder plain upon him. Then the torches went out. The fire burst sparks like a storm of stars, and in that violent dark, A sword flashed. Kings die quickly in the dark, but panic lives longer. The great goblin's cry ended in a wet ruin. One moment he had been all fury and grasping hands, the next he was falling, cut down before his own court. Fire spat cinders across the cavern floor. Goblins shrieked and scattered, colliding in blind terror as more sparks rained down among them. The dark became a living thing then, thick with smoke, fear, and steel. Out of it came a voice Bilbo knew. "Follow me." Gandalf moved through that chaos like a knife through rotten cloth. Here and there his sword burned pale for an instant, enough to show a path, a fallen goblin, a tunnel mouth opening beyond the chamber. The dwarves, still half-bound or reeling from rough handling, were driven by no courage finer than the old need to live. They ran after him, Bilbo among them, his feet slipping on bad stone, his lungs burning in the foul air. Behind them, the goblins recovered quickly. Fear does not keep a hunted thing from hunting in turn. Horns sounded deeper in the mountain. Cries multiplied through side passages. The chase began in earnest. They plunged through ways too narrow for comfort and too crooked for memory. Sometimes Gandalf's light showed rough stairs cut into the rock. Sometimes low vaults where all but Bilbo had to crouch. Sometimes drops on one side that vanished into black gulfs with no bottom visible. The goblins came after them with the certainty of creatures running home ground. Dori had Bilbo on his back when the rear of the company faltered. Bilbo hated it, but hated the thought of being left more. Then came a rush behind, a goblin leaping, clawing, near enough for Bilbo to smell its breath. Dori lurched, hands struck. The dwarf cried out. Bilbo fell. Stone hit him like a hammer. Light burst red behind his eyes. Then black. The noise of pursuit rushed away from him like water draining from a bath. He tried to call out, but the mountain took his voice. And then there was nothing at all. Lore question for the comments. Do you think Bilbo's fall was mere bad luck, or one of those pivotal moments in Middle-earth where chance and fate quietly become the same thing?